welcome back to our second episode of the URC Hot Seat. My name is Maria. I'm a fourth year criminal justice major and part of the social media committee. And welcome to our second guest of the URC Hot Seat.
Hello, everyone. My name is Julissa Venegas. I am a student assistant here at the Undocumented Resource Center. I am also in my senior year, majoring in psychology with a minor in counseling and social change.
All right, okay, we're gonna get started with our first segment of the interview. How was Julissa as a child?
Very, very quiet child. But I think a lot of it has to do with, like growing up undocumented, having my parents always tell me that, I needed to like just stay in the shadows, not make myself very known, just because, there's dangers to that. I remember they would talk to me a lot about like immigration and like they would always like kind of prepare me. They would say like, like one of these days, like immigration's gonna come, they're gonna take us away. This is what you have to do. This is what you have to say, who to call. And in my head, I was like, damn, like, is immigration like the boogeyman or like, like I didn't, yeah, el cucuy, definitely. I don't know what that means. Like, who are these people? Like, are we bad people? Like, why are they gonna come take us? And so I always learned to just like keep to myself and not make myself like known, do not get in trouble with the law, like, never that. But yeah, I was just always like the, typical older sister.
Yeah. Okay. Second question. Where are you from? When did you immigrate? And do you have any recollection of that event?
Immigrated to the United States when I was 2 years old, so I definitely don't have any recollection of that. But I do have the stories from my mom and like from family members who helped us immigrate. From what I remember, my mom actually told, I'm not gonna say who, but somebody very close to us to, cross me, my brother, and my sister through the border, and she didn't come until like maybe a day after, just to make sure we were safe first. Um, but yeah, that's pretty much it.
Thank you for sharing. I know it takes a lot of courage. Okay. What inspired you to pursue higher education despite the challenges that undocumented students often face?
That is a good question. I think a lot of it has to do with like me being a single mother. I didn't think I could even go to college right after high school. I talked to several counselors and they all basically told me like, yeah, like, undocumented students don't go to college. Like, if you do, you're gonna be paying like out of state tuition. Like, it's not possible unless you have so much money saved up. And obviously, like, my family didn't have that. Just having my son, I started to look elsewhere. I started to look for other resources. And that's when I found out about like, the California Dream Act and all of that. So I think a lot of it también tiene, like, it has to do with like, how do you say, like trying to prove people wrong in a sense. I had a lot of people who told me like I was crazy for trying to like go to college, especially like, having my young baby at home and like being undocumented. But I didn't let that stop me, fortunately. And just imagining like a better future, just like how my mom imagined for herself and her kids. She crossed that border in order for us to get that education, so I wasn't just gonna like throw that away, knowing what she had to go through.
Thank you for sharing. Going off of that question, who is your biggest source of strength?
Obviously, my son Mateo, he is my biggest source of strength. There has been a lot of times where I'm like, dang, like I should just give up. It's really a lot, having to work like two jobs and like, spending time with my son and like even having time for myself, like all together could be very overwhelming. But then I think about him and I think about his future and like, like my mom didn't get the chance to go to school, so I'm like, I'm doing this for him. I like to think that like he may be like saved my life just because if it wasn't for him, I probably wouldn't be doing anything that I'm doing today.
Talk to us a little bit more about your baby.
Yeah, so my son is 6 years old. So just this year, he was actually diagnosed with autism. And one thing that I learned just from being a mom is like, not only do you have to like advocate for yourself at all times, but you also like as a mother have to advocate for your children. And it could be very hard, especially growing up, like I said, very shy, very reserved, like in the shadows, being scared of like authority or even like raising my voice. So now that I'm a mom, I'm like, walking into these like educated spaces and like going to like the counseling room, the principal's office, like having to advocate for him has been like one of the biggest challenges, but also like the most like transforming experience as well.
Oh, that's so cute. Again, I want to give you props for that because I
Thank
know
you.
standing up for yourself, let alone for your child, can be something that's very hard to do. It's very hard to break down those inner barriers that don't allow you to do so. So, again, I
Oh,
give you
thank
so
you.
much props as a single mom. I'm very, very proud of you.
Oh,
Me
thank
gonna
you.
cry too.
Not
Okay.
yet.
Were there any moments during college when you thought about giving up? And if so, what kept you going?
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, a lot of times, not only did I think about it, but I did, in a sense, give up. I took a couple years off, especially during COVID. That was one of the most difficult times for me. And then also like just dealing like with having to find childcare and like having nobody like to support me. Damn, I'm gonna cry, but a lot of times like my family would just be like, a woman's place is at home with her child, especially if you don't have a partner. Women shouldn't be going out to like get an education. Like your focus should be your baby, and I understand that point of view.
With the recently getting approved for advanced parole, what do you look forward to the most regarding your trip?
Yeah, so I actually, yeah, I just recently got approved for advanced parole, which is like it's very big, especially for those who have DACA. I encourage you guys to like please travel. It could be a very scary experience, but it could also bring a lot of benefits. But I think what I'm mostly excited about is meeting my dad for the first time. So the story is like my mom actually immigrated to the United States, escaping him. He was unfortunately like very violent. He was addicted to drugs. So I try to put myself in his shoes. I understand my mom. I love my mom for what she did, but at the same time, I also understand his point of view. Drugs could make people do very crazy and like, yeah, like very crazy things. And so when I was like, talking to him, I felt like he was very misunderstood. Like I feel like he was robbed, and I was robbed from like getting a dad. And a lot of times I felt like I needed him, and he wasn't there. So I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna meet him for the first time. I'm gonna meet my family for the first time after 24 years. And I didn't even know I had my grandma. Like I didn't know my grandma was alive. And yeah, I think that's like one of the most exciting, and I feel like it's truly gonna be very healing to meet him. Um, I mean, I grew up with a stepdad, but I always felt like I always knew he wasn't my dad. I felt like I didn't belong. I was always the black sheep of the family, so I think meeting my dad is gonna bring a lot of clarity and hopefully a lot of like very good things.
I'm gonna keep saying thank you, but again, thank you for being vulnerable. It takes a lot of strength, inner strength, above all. So, thank you. Just know that your testimony or your life experiences are very powerful, and you hold a lot of strength.
Thank you.
Do you ever grieve the idea of what your life would have been like if you would have never immigrated?
Yeah, I think while applying for advanced parole and like actually getting approved, it has become a lot more real. And so I've been like kind of reminiscing a lot about what my life could have been if my mom had never brought me to the United States. I know I probably wouldn't have even been alive because we the reason we escaped was because we got threatened with death, so I most likely wouldn't have been alive. But if it wasn't for that circumstance, I feel like, my life could have been very different. And I think a lot, I'm like, damn, like, what would have happened, like, if I would have just stayed with my dad, like, would I still have the same issues that I have now? Like, um, because also in the United States, something that I learned a lot is like parents are always working. Like if you come from an immigrant household, you will rarely see your parents, or if you do, like you will see them working all the time. And so growing up, I didn't have my mom, I didn't have my stepdad. Um, Me and my siblings were left alone most of the day. I didn't see my mom until like 6 in the morning sometimes. unless we were like left with babysitters. So we were kind of just left to fend for ourselves and like raise ourselves. So I didn't have that guidance. I didn't have any like of that love that I crave so much. So I feel like because of that, like I had to go look for that somewhere else, and I got pregnant like very early. That came with its own set of challenges. So I always do think, like I'm so grateful for my son, but I do think like if I would have stayed in Mexico, like I I don't know, like I don't know what would have happened. Would I have like found that love that I crave so much, or like would I have to have worked extra hard? I probably wouldn't be able to get the chance for an education. But yeah, I question that a lot.
To almost close off our segment and end it on a more positive note, looking back on your journey, what are you most proud of?
Oh, I could say like I'm actually proud of a lot of things. But definitely just like not giving up and like continuing my education, regardless of the challenges. I've been able to make it this far, like being a single mother, like being undocumented. I think it is a big deal. So like I mean, props to all parents out there who are pursuing an education or even undocumented students. Like I understand how hard it could be, even me with DACA, and like having that permit to work is such a blessing. But there are other students who don't have that, like what is it, like that permit or like that privilege like I do. So I do consider myself very privileged. Um, and then also just like I've noticed a big change in my personality, especially here at the Undocumented Resource Center. I feel like I've been like forced out of my shell. I become like the person that I always looked up to when I was little. I'm like the person that I needed most.
Is there any advice or words of affirmation you would like to share for other undocumented students who may struggle with self doubt and their own set of struggles?
I think just one thing that helps me is just remembering where I came from, like all everything that I had to go through, that my parents had to go through in order to get here. I know it's like very cliche because like sometimes like when I want to give up, my mom be like, "Oh, I didn't cross the border for you to just like not do anything with your life," you know. So I think about that a lot, and it's true, you know, like that was such a big sacrifice for my mom to make, and so for me to just give up is not even an option. um, but yeah, definitely just remember what your ancestors have to go through in order for you to even be here in this space.
Thank you for sharing. We're going to move on to our second segment where our Instagram viewers were able to ask some questions that they would like Julissa to answer. The first question is, why did you choose to minor in counseling and social change?
Um, well, I always knew I wanted to be a counselor, so that was easy. But with the social change part, I feel like this year, like I mentioned, has been a transformational year for me. Especially being here at the Undocumented Resource Center, and the support of like Cynthia and Ingrid and Angel. They've really pushed me to, yeah, like I said, like advocate for others and also for myself. So I've also been like part of like protests and like just keeping myself informed and like even informing others. Like that's something that has been like such a big part of my identity. But now I get to exercise it, and so social change has become like such a passion of mine.
I know you did mention that you always knew that you wanted to be a school counselor. Can you reiterate it a little bit on that?
Yeah, actually, I will mention like one of the biggest reasons I want to be a school counselor was because when I was in high school, I noticed there was a huge lack of resources, especially for undocumented students. I did mention, you know, like me trying to enroll in the military and all that. But the reason was because the counselor I had approached and I trusted had no idea what the Dream Act even was or like what AB 540 meant. She didn't give me any information. And when I told her, like, hey, like, you know, I'm planning on enrolling in college, she basically told me that wasn't a possibility. And then she suggested that I actually started working after high school. And, you know, I did do that. Like, after I got denied from the military, I took a year off. I decided to um, just service my community. But then after my pregnancy, I was pretty much lost. I actually started working as a janitor while being pregnant, and so when I went back to a different counselor, she just told me like, "Well, you're just gonna have to keep doing that. You know, like there's no way you're gonna be able to go to college." And so I feel like becoming a school counselor, I would like to be able to like break that barrier and like help other students like myself, other undocumented students, actually go to college. And like also the parents, I feel like a lot of parents are stuck in that mindset that like, no, like my child should go to work right after high school, like, like education is a waste of time. But that's not true, and like my goal is definitely to educate other counselors, educate parents and students.
What has been the biggest challenge you faced as an undocumented immigrant?
That's really good. I think honestly, sorry, I'm like so far from the mic. But in all honesty, I think dealing with law enforcement has been like the most like, I don't know, like the worst challenge I've ever faced. Unfortunately, like yeah, like I went through like a very abusive relationship, and so when I had the option of calling law enforcement, I really questioned myself just because I was like, oh, like, I'm undocumented, like, they're not gonna believe me, or like, they're not gonna wanna help me. Even just calling law enforcement in general is very scary because you never know, like, how they're gonna act towards you.
What motivates you to keep grinding as a student?
My baby.
How do you balance school, work, and personal life, like hobbies and parenting?
Oof, that's a good question. I honestly don't know how I do it either, but I think just like willpower and motivation, knowing what I want, knowing what I'm going for, and just doing it every day. I do it tired, I do it scared, but I do it. Period.
How do you manage all your roles while taking care of yourself and your mental well being?
That's very difficult. But I do make sure, I keep my Google Calendar and I make time for therapy. I make time for, spending time outdoors with my son, exercise, dance. Yeah, it's really hard. I can't really like. There's no book or guide to how to do it. Everybody does it a little bit different, but I think also just having the support from like the undocumented the research center, Cynthia, my sister, my mom, like having this just like village to help me. And like, when I'm feeling down, when I'm tired, like I have somebody to watch over me, some people I trust. And like, believe it or not, I've come into the the resource center just crying, breaking down because of how overwhelmed it could get. But even just talking to a counselor like Cynthia has really just brought me back. um, and she just reminds me, like, like what my goal was in the beginning and why I'm doing what I'm doing. So yeah, like I said, like giving up is not an option right now. I'm almost at the finish line. So um, yeah, this is for everybody that's going through like something similar. There's always like hope and there's always like a light at the end of the tunnel.
What is your go to Better Buzz order?
The pink mojito with the the chili crunch wrap hits every time.
Last question. What is your favorite spot to study on campus?
I was gonna say the Undocumented Resource Center because I don't know, like I feel like I get distracted very easily, and so like coming to the URC kind of like I always have somebody to talk to here. Um, but to study, I would say honestly in the grass, the grass area like near the turtle pond. I just I like to be in nature and be in the sun.
Thank you. So that completes our second segment, but I do want to give you the chance to maybe add anything that might be in your mind or anything that you feel like someone can benefit, someone out there.
Hmm, that's a good question. I would say, honestly, my biggest advice for anybody coming in, or even if you've been here for a long time, just find your community, find your spot. Like for me, that was the Undocumented Resource Center. It might not be for everybody, but definitely, like, these resource centers are here for you. Like, I mean, you're technically paying for them, so use them. Or else, like, it's kind of like you're throwing money away. Um, but yeah, I mean, we're here for you. Find your community, find your people, and it's gonna be like so much easier just coming to school and like studying and like getting through the day. I feel like if it wasn't for the center, I honestly wouldn't be as motivated. um, yeah, and we have snacks.
And dino nuggets. But yeah, okay, so that completes our second episode to the URC Hot Seat. I want to thank you once
Thank
again
you.
for being vulnerable. And even though we did cry a little bit, I feel like it was something that was necessary to say, and it just comes to prove how strong of a woman you've come to be. And you're only going to get much stronger. So,